On a freshly paved road, a group of workers is standing near the curb as a large road grader passes by. Suddenly, one of the grader's massive tires explodes with tremendous force, sending a shockwave and debris flying. The workers are knocked off their feet by the blast. This highlights the hidden dangers of high-pressure tires on heavy machinery. A catastrophic tire failure can be as violent as a bomb. The lesson is the critical importance of regular tire inspection and maintenance to prevent overpressurization or damage that could lead to a deadly blowout. In a narrow alleyway next to a construction site, pedestrians and workers move about. High above, a large blue panel is improperly secured to the scaffolding. Without warning, the panel detaches and plummets to the ground, narrowly missing several people before striking a worker. This incident is a stark reminder of the dangers of unsecured overhead materials. All items at height must be securely fastened, and exclusion zones should be established below to prevent anyone from entering a potential drop zone. At a high-rise construction site, a crane is lifting a load. A worker on the ground, standing directly under the operation, gets his clothing snagged by the rigging as the load ascends. He is hoisted dozens of feet into the air before losing his grip and falling. This tragic event underscores multiple safety failures. Workers should never be positioned under a suspended load, and proper rigging procedures must ensure no loose equipment or clothing can become entangled. Furthermore, this demonstrates the absolute necessity for fall protection equipment when working at height. At a loading dock, two men are attempting to close the rear doors of a large shipping container. As they struggle with the latches, the truck, which is not properly secured, begins to roll backward. One man fails to get out of the way in time and is horrifically crushed between the trailer and the dock. This fatal incident was entirely preventable. The number one rule when working with trailers is to always secure the vehicle with wheel chocks before any loading or unloading activities begin, to prevent any unintended movement. In a large metal fabrication facility, a group of workers is elevated in a makeshift man basket attached to the forks of a forklift. As the operator maneuvers the unstable setup, the forklift loses its balance and tips over, sending the workers crashing to the ground. This demonstrates a severe misuse of equipment. Forklifts are designed for lifting materials, not people. Only purpose-built aerial work platforms, or man lifts, which provide a stable and secure base, should be used for elevating personnel, ensuring proper training and adherence to weight limits. A forklift operator is unloading a tall, unstable pallet of bottled drinks from the back of a truck. As he backs away, the load begins to tip. The driver makes the fatal mistake of jumping from his cab to try and manually steady the falling pallet. But he is instantly overwhelmed by the weight and crushed beneath it. This is a tragic lesson in instinct versus training. The correct procedure is to let the load fall. No product is worth a human life. Always prioritize personal safety and stay clear of shifting or falling materials. In a stone or woodworking shop, a worker is standing near a series of large, heavy slabs that are stored vertically without proper support. When he attempts to move one, it triggers a domino effect, causing the entire stack to topple over onto him. The immense weight leaves him with no chance of escape. This incident shows a critical failure in material storage. Heavy, unstable items like slabs must be stored in specifically designed A-frame racks that prevent them from tipping and ensure they can be handled safely one at a time. In a busy shipping port at night, a straddle carrier is positioning a container next to a tall stack. The operator misjudges the distance and collides with the stack, destabilizing it completely. A cascade of containers topples over, crashing down onto a nearby yard truck and its driver. This highlights the need for extreme precision and situational awareness in container yards. Operators must manage their speed and maintain safe clearance distances at all times to prevent catastrophic chain reactions. During an unloading operation, a worker stands on a flatbed truck next to a massive, unsecured pipe. As workers on the ground begin to move it, the pipe suddenly rolls off the side of the truck, crushing the man standing in its path. This is a classic line-of-fire accident. When handling heavy, cylindrical objects, workers must never position themselves on the downhill side. Loads must be chocked and secured until a controlled offloading process, guided by machinery, can be initiated safely. Inside a factory, a worker stands directly beneath a large metal sheet being moved by an overhead crane with a clamp-style lift. The clamps suddenly fail, and the heavy sheet drops directly onto the worker. The lesson here is absolute. Never, under any circumstances, stand or work under a suspended load. All lifting operations require a cleared area below, and workers should use taglines from a safe distance to guide the load, eliminating the risk of being in the drop zone. In a poorly lit workshop, two men are working on the floor near what appears to be a compressed gas cylinder. Suddenly, it explodes in a massive fireball. Gas cylinders are potential bombs if mishandled. They must always be stored upright, secured from falling, and inspected for damage before use. A man operates a large industrial lathe, leaning over the rapidly spinning chuck. His loose jacket sleeve gets snagged, and he is instantly and violently pulled into the machine, spinning at a terrifying speed before a coworker hits the emergency stop. This is a classic entanglement accident. The number one rule when working with rotating machinery is absolutely no loose clothing, untied long hair, or jewelry. These items can be grabbed in a fraction of a second. Additionally, a chuck shield could have prevented this contact. At a gas station next to a busy roundabout, a chaotic car accident occurs. One of the involved cars rolls backward, out of control, directly into the station forecourt, striking an unsuspecting attendant sitting in a chair. This incident underscores the risk of working near live traffic. Protective barriers, like bollards, are essential to shield work areas from errant vehicles. A large truck reverses toward a loading bay, while a pedestrian walks directly into its path from behind. The driver, with no visibility in this massive blind spot, continues backing up and runs the person over completely. This is a tragic and preventable blind spot accident. Large vehicles must be equipped with functioning backup alarms and cameras. Crucially, a dedicated spotter should always guide a reversing truck, maintaining constant visual contact with the driver. In a busy shipping yard, a man walks across the pavement while completely absorbed by his phone. He fails to notice an approaching forklift and steps directly into its path, getting struck and knocked down. This is a clear case of distracted walking in a high-risk environment. Using a phone while walking in an active yard with heavy machinery should be strictly forbidden. Pedestrians must maintain full situational awareness at all times. A mechanic performs welding work underneath a car on a lift. Sparks from his tool ignite a flammable liquid on the floor, likely spilled fuel, and the vehicle erupts into a massive ball of fire. The mechanic is forced to scramble to safety from the inferno. This is a failure of hot work safety procedures. Before any welding or grinding, the area must be completely cleared of all flammable materials, including liquids, vapors, and oily rags. A fire extinguisher must be within arm's reach, and it is also standard practice to disconnect the vehicle's battery. In a busy workshop, a worker is bent over, focused on a task near a large piece of industrial machinery. Several colleagues are nearby, but no one is supervising the immediate area. Without warning, a massive, vertically positioned component of the machine, likely a heavy press or mold, detaches from its housing. It pivots downward with immense force, crushing the unsuspecting worker underneath its weight. Colleagues rush over in a panic, but the damage is already done. This catastrophic failure points to a severe lack of mechanical integrity and inadequate safety checks. Regular, thorough inspections of all machine parts, especially those under load, are non-negotiable. Furthermore, implementing lockout-tagout procedures during work in close proximity to such equipment is essential to prevent unexpected activation or mechanical failure. Inside a textile factory, several workers move between rows of massive industrial looms. The area is a complex web of rapidly moving threads and rotating components. One worker carries a long metal rod across the aisle. As he walks, the end of the rod he's carrying gets snagged by the machinery. Instead of letting go, he tries to pull it free. The machine's power is overwhelming, and it instantly pulls him off his feet, dragging him violently into the rotating mechanism. His body is pulled completely into the machine as his colleagues look on in horror, helpless to stop the equipment. This incident is a stark reminder of the dangers of loose items and improper material handling around rotating machinery. The key safety lesson is to maintain situational awareness and never fight a machine's power. If something gets caught, the immediate reaction should be to let go and hit the nearest emergency stop. Proper machine guarding should also be in place to prevent contact with moving parts. Two workers are positioned near a large industrial rolling press. One worker, in a blue sweater, leans over the machine's in-feed area, seemingly trying to adjust or clear something while it's operational. While he is leaning far into the machine, the powerful rollers suddenly activate its speed. He is instantly caught and dragged headfirst into the mechanism, disappearing completely between the massive cylinders in a fraction of a second. This is a devastating example of why lockout-tagout procedures are critical. Before any maintenance or adjustment, the machine must be completely de-energized and the power source locked out. Reaching into an active machine is a fatal gamble. In a large fabrication hangar, several workers are gathered around a massive, partially constructed metal hull section. High above, an overhead crane is maneuvering another heavy, curved steel plate. Suddenly, the rigging fails. The multi-ton steel plate detaches from the crane and plummets directly onto the structure below, striking the workers who have no time to react. This incident highlights a catastrophic failure in overhead lifting safety. It's crucial that all rigging is properly inspected and rated for the load. Most importantly, a designated exclusion zone must be strictly enforced directly below any suspended load. At a sorting facility, a worker stands at the base of a steep conveyor belt. His clothing gets snagged by the moving belt, and he's instantly pulled off his feet and carried upwards, unable to break free. This demonstrates the risk of entanglement. Loose clothing is extremely hazardous near conveyors, which must have accessible emergency stop cords along their full length. Two men are feeding large sheets into a green industrial machine. While one worker is positioned at the entrance to adjust the material, the machine's heavy upper assembly suddenly collapses, crushing him against the lower section. This catastrophic mechanical failure highlights the need for rigorous maintenance schedules. Hydraulic systems and structural supports on heavy equipment must be inspected routinely by qualified personnel to prevent such a sudden, fatal collapse. Inside an industrial laundry plant, a worker in a blue uniform is working between two large, rotating machines. He appears to get his arm caught in one of the machines, which then violently pulls him in and spins his entire body around its axis multiple times with incredible speed. Rotating shafts and rollers are unforgiving. This incident shows a complete failure of machine guarding. All nip points and moving parts must be fully enclosed to make human contact impossible. A worker in a workshop is operating a machine that winds material onto a large, spinning roll. He stands very close to the rotating mechanism while it is in operation. His arm becomes entangled in the material being wound onto the roll. In an instant, the machine's torque pulls him in. Wrapping his entire body around the spool at high speed, he is spun around violently before the machine comes to a stop. This is a tragic illustration of the dangers of unguarded, rotating equipment. The primary safety failure is the lack of guarding to prevent access to the point of operation. Operators must never wear loose clothing and should use tools to manipulate materials, rather than hands, to prevent entanglement. In a foundry, workers are near a large, open pit filled with cooling liquid. An overhead crane with an electromagnet is moving large metal billets. As the crane moves a massive metal block over the workers, the electromagnet unexpectedly deactivates. The huge block plummets down, striking one worker and knocking him directly into the pit, where he disappears beneath the surface. This incident reveals multiple severe safety violations. First, the rule of never standing under a suspended load was broken. An exclusion zone is mandatory for all overhead lifts. Second, using an electromagnet to move material over personnel is exceptionally dangerous, as a power failure can lead to an instant release of the load. Finally, open pits must be clearly marked and guarded with railings to prevent falls. At a residential construction site, a mini excavator is digging a deep trench right alongside the foundation of a concrete wall. Several workers are in the immediate vicinity. The excavation undermines the wall's support, causing it to suddenly collapse into the trench, burying one worker and sending others scrambling. This is a critical failure in excavation safety. Never dig in a way that compromises the structural integrity of nearby buildings or walls. Proper shoring, sloping, and professional assessment are required before beginning any such work. Inside a vast recycling facility, a person is walking through an area with huge piles of plastic waste. An approaching front-end loader, tasked with moving the material, has a significant blind spot. The operator does not see the person and proceeds to push them with a full bucket, burying them under a mountain of refuse. This highlights the critical need for strict separation of pedestrian traffic and heavy machinery in industrial environments. High visibility vests and clear, designated walkways are essential to prevent such tragic accidents. In an incredibly dangerous act, a worker is lowered into a deep, narrow trench while standing in the bucket of an excavator. As he reaches the bottom, the unstable, unshored walls of the trench give way, burying him instantly. This scene shows two fatal errors. First, machinery buckets should never be used to transport personnel. Second, any trench of this depth requires proper shoring or benching to prevent a collapse. This was a completely preventable tragedy caused by ignoring fundamental safety rules. In a factory, a worker enters the safety-fenced area of an automated production line to make an adjustment. Without warning, the robotic stacking machine activates, moving along its track and crushing the worker against a stationary part of the line. This is a deadly failure of lockout-tagout procedures. Before any worker enters a machine's operational space, the equipment must be completely de-energized, locked, and tagged to ensure it cannot be started accidentally. A man is operating a tracked post-hole drilling rig in a grassy field next to a property line. As he drills, the auger strikes a high-pressure underground gas line. A massive explosion of dirt and gas erupts, violently throwing the machine and operator backward. This dangerous event underscores the universal rule: call before you dig. Always have underground utilities professionally marked before any excavation or drilling to prevent life-threatening encounters with gas, electric, or water lines. On a snow-covered street, a front-end loader is clearing snow near parked cars. A pedestrian, walking on the street due to the snow-covered sidewalk, moves into the loader's path. The operator, likely dealing with blind spots, makes a turn and strikes the person, knocking them down. This illustrates the heightened risks in adverse weather. Operators of heavy machinery must exercise extreme caution, while pedestrians should make themselves visible and avoid the operational area of such equipment. In a warehouse, a worker stands in a marked walkway, completely absorbed by his phone. Meanwhile, a tugger train approaches from behind. The driver initiates a turn, causing the trailing carts to swing wide and collide with the distracted worker, knocking him to the ground. This incident is a lesson in mutual responsibility and situational awareness. Pedestrians must always be aware of their surroundings, especially around mobile equipment, and operators must ensure their path is clear before turning. Inside a factory, 2 workers are performing maintenance within a robotic cell, apparently having bypassed the safety gates. One worker leans over a component just as the large robotic arm activates unexpectedly. The arm swings around and crushes the man's head and upper body against a fixed part of the machinery. This is a horrific example of why bypassing safety interlocks is forbidden. Proper lockout-not-tagout procedures are the only way to safely service robotic equipment, guaranteeing all energy sources are isolated before entry. At a paper mill, a worker tries clearing a jam from a large industrial roller. Suddenly, he's violently pulled into the machine. This is a classic failure of lockout-tagout. Power must be cut and locked out before maintenance. A tow truck has parked with its steel winch cable stretched taut across a residential street. A scooter rider, completely unaware of the nearly invisible hazard, drives at speed directly into it. He is violently clotheslined and thrown from the bike. This is gross negligence. Any cable stretched across a public way must be made highly visible with flags and cones, and the area should have been completely blocked off from traffic. In an auto repair shop, a mechanic carefully guides a pickup truck into a service bay. The driver suddenly accelerates instead of braking, pinning the worker against the wall. This shows the inherent danger of being in a vehicle's path. Spotters must always maintain a safe distance and have a clear escape route. Inside a textile factory, workers stand near a massive thread winding machine where hundreds of threads are fed at high speed. One worker gets too close, and a thread snags his clothing, violently pulling him off his feet and dragging him toward the intake rollers. This machinery presents a severe entanglement risk. Proper machine guarding is essential to create a barrier between workers and moving parts. Additionally, loose clothing should never be worn, and emergency stop controls must be clearly marked. An instructor and a child ride a tandem zip line over a deep ravine. Suddenly, the child slips completely out of their harness. The instructor heroically manages to grab and hold on to the child as they speed down the line. This is a shocking failure of pre-ride safety protocols. All harnesses, carabiners, and safety lines must be inspected and double-checked before every single use. A forklift loads a stack of heavy industrial tires onto a truck bed, where another worker is waiting. The load is unstable and suddenly topples over, crushing the man beneath its immense weight. This is a fatal mistake of being in the line of fire. Workers must never be under a suspended or unstable load. The load should have been stacked securely, and workers should clear the area during lifting operations. A man enters a hardware store, grabs a can of flammable liquid, and immediately starts a fire in an aisle. This isn't a workplace accident, but a deliberate act of arson. For any business, this shows the importance of having multiple, clearly marked fire extinguishers unobstructed emergency exits, and a well-rehearsed evacuation plan. At a tire shop, a mechanic works on a large truck tire lying on the ground. Without any warning, the tire explodes with incredible force, throwing the mechanic through the air. This catastrophic event is why inflating large tires requires strict safety protocols. Overpressurization or damage to the tire's structure can turn it into a bomb. All large tires must be inflated inside a reinforced safety cage, which is designed to contain the explosive energy. Workers should never lean or stand directly over a tire as it is inflated. At a loading dock, a forklift operator begins to raise the forks. At that exact moment, a scooter carrying 2 people drives directly into their path, colliding hard with the rising steel forks. This incident highlights the chaos of a poorly managed work zone. There is a severe lack of situational awareness from both the scooter driver and the forklift operator. Industrial yards require clear, designated pathways for vehicles and pedestrians, good lighting, and for all personnel to remain alert. A worker in a warehouse is using a manual pallet jack to move a massive, vertically stored roll of paper. As he pulls the jack, the immense roll becomes unstable, tips over, and falls directly on top of him, completely crushing him against the floor. Storing heavy, cylindrical objects vertically without proper chocks or racking is extremely unsafe. This incident was caused by improper storage. Such items must be stored horizontally in approved racks or, if vertical, securely braced to prevent tipping. A worker is near a conveyor when a heavy metal beam falls from above, striking him directly. This highlights the ever-present danger of falling objects. Hard hats are a last line of defense. The primary focus must be on securing all overhead materials and equipment before allowing personnel into the area. On a quiet street, a person is sweeping near the curb while another stands nearby on his phone. A black SUV begins reversing down the road towards them. The driver, clearly not looking, continues to reverse at a steady pace. The SUV strikes the sweeper, knocking them to the ground and running them over with its rear wheel before stopping. This incident is a tragic outcome of distracted driving and a lack of situational awareness. Drivers, especially when reversing, must always check their surroundings. Pedestrians, in turn, must remain vigilant, as relying on drivers to always see you is a dangerous assumption. At a construction site, an excavator operator uses the machine's bucket to lift a heavy metal ladder. A ground worker stands directly in the path of the operation, attempting to guide the load with his hands. As the operator lifts the ladder, it becomes unstable, slips from the bucket's grip, and pivots downward, striking the ground worker. This is a clear case of improper lifting procedure. An excavator bucket is not designed for lifting such objects. Proper slings and rigging should have been used. Furthermore, the ground worker should never have placed himself in the line of fire where the load could fall. In this highly automated aluminum casting facility, a worker in a red hard hat is using a hoist near an active industrial robot. Crucially, the worker is freely moving within the robot's maximum reach. There are no physical safety cages or light curtains separating the man from the machine. He is sharing the robot's workspace, relying only on his own awareness. The worker places a stack of ingots and turns his back to the robot, walking directly into its programmed path. The robot swings a heavy, loaded basket, colliding with the worker with brutal force and throwing him across the floor. The robot, oblivious, completes its cycle as the man lies motionless. This is a catastrophic failure of robotic safety integration. A robot's work envelope is an absolute no-go zone for unprotected personnel. This area must be protected by physical fences with interlocked gates or presence-sensing devices, like light curtains that trigger an immediate shutdown if crossed. Assuming a worker can safely work around an industrial robot is a fatal mistake. This incident was an inevitability caused by a fundamentally flawed system design that failed to separate human and machine workspaces. In a stamping plant, workers operate a large industrial press. One man reaches deep inside the press to adjust material. At that moment, the press cycles, trapping his arm. He cries out, and his colleagues react instantly, rushing to hit the emergency stop and attempting to reverse the machine. While the co-worker's quick reaction is commendable, the incident should never have happened. Reaching into the point of operation of an active press is extremely dangerous. Safety systems like light curtains, two-hand controls, and physical guards are designed specifically to make this impossible, indicating a severe breakdown in safety protocols. In a container port, a large reach stacker is lifting a container from a trailer. The machine becomes critically unbalanced, causing it to slowly but unstoppably tip over and crash onto its side. This demonstrates a critical loss of stability. Reach stacker operators must adhere to strict load charts, accounting for weight, boom extension, and angle. The ground must also be firm and level for all heavy lifts. Exceeding the machine's capacity or operating on an unstable surface is a direct cause of such catastrophic tip-over incidents.